What is happening, y'all? Cowboy here. Welcome back to another Code Vein build video, and the ridiculous amount of burst you just saw was Mage Build 2.0. Now, I know I just put up the Mage build video a couple days ago, actually, but a lot of people in the comments section were mentioning the Queen Blood codes, and I looked more into it and basically had to play through the game a second time to gain access to all the blood codes I was missing. And needless to say, with access to all of the codes, things have gotten a good bit spicier. 30,000 plus damage in a single burst, spicier. So, today we're going to jump on into the build, and the first thing we're going to be doing is taking a look at the blood codes, so obvious spoilers here. Now, going on into the codes, you essentially get one code or the other depending on a circumstance. So we're going to call these dual codes. And with the dual codes, each dual code is related to a particular successor, and if you manage to fully restore the memory of that successor after you beat it, you gain access to their code. So if you restore Valentino's memory, you get Isis. If you fail to restore her memory, you get Queen's Ribcage. This is also the case with Fion or Queen's Breath, Skikoth or Queen's Claw, and lastly, Harmonia and Queen's Throat. Now, in addition to that, if you manage to restore all the memories and then restore the Eos vestiges as well, at the end of the game you'll also get the Queen blood code in addition to Hades. So ideally your first playthrough of the game you're going to want to restore everything, namely because we're going to be playing with Harmonia as our blood code, so you're definitely going to want that, and there's quite a few spells in Queen that you'll want access to. Now that we've gone through the codes, let's jump into the build. Now, not too much has changed. I'd still recommend an Argent Wolf Blade with Devour on it for your main. If you don't have access to that, you can of course run Crimson Longsword or Sunset Devour. In addition, I'm running Hanakamuro as my secondary, which as you can see has a good bit more damage, but the main reason it's not our primary is this sword is very fast and spammy, whereas this one isn't as spammy. And with this sword in particular, the whole point is to spam it to get back your Iker. That is what we're getting out of having Devour, along with Weapon Drain up. It puts us up to that nice 0.65 drain rating, which means in roughly 2 swings you restore 3 Iker, which is nuts. So besides that, we're going to still be running the Spur, whether it's Collateral Spur, Judgment, or Suicide. These are just different color schemes. But Spur is going to give you that A scaling and willpower, which is what you're going to want for a mage-oriented build. Moving on from there, our passives have changed slightly. We're still going to run Health Stimulant and Max Iker Boost. We're going to run Weapon Drain up, of course, but we're switching over to Dexterity Willpower up. Now, previously, we were running Mind Willpower up. As you can see, we get a slight pinch in Stamina, a slight pinch in our Light Gifts, but switching over to Dexterity is essentially giving us more Drain Attack and more damage on our weapons, all in all making it a much better choice. Now, as for our spells, those have changed up quite a bit. As I already mentioned, we're going to be running Harmonia. The reason for this is even compared against some of the late game stuff, namely Queen, Harmonia still has a higher Dark Gift damage threshold and more Iker. So all in all, for casting, this is going to be the primary choice for a casting code. Now, moving on into our spells, we have Bloodshot, Blast Bolt, Icarus Ice, and Execution on our top slots, and then Dark Shout, Sands of Depravity, Fourfold Verdict, and Purging Thorn in our bottom slots. And each of these has a very specific use. The main reason we are still running Bloodshot, despite it being a very early spell, is it's instant. It is instant on-demand damage that you can throw on out. You can use this to finish off enemies that are low, knock enemies that are hanging on ledges off. And the main reason is because it's instant. A couple folks were mentioning Argent Wolf Cross, and Argent Wolf Cross is a great ability that only costs 3, but it actually has a hard cast time to it, and it's just going to be slower. As you can see, that's going to take roughly 2 to 3 seconds for you to get out, whereas tossing out your Bloodshot, the second you hit the button, you're getting damage in. And since we're not going to really be using this all that much, that is why I prefer Bloodshot. As for our secondary, Lightning is still just, it's instant on-demand damage. You can see we're doing about 5,000 damage with a single cast of that. Very, very potent throwing that on out. The main alternative to that is Firestorm, which as you can see just has less scaling. So unless something's resistant to lightning, there's no reason to not run it. As for Execution, this is going to be our melee smash option. What I mean by that is, you're rolling around, you're getting surrounded by a bunch of stuff. You drop that on out for fat damage. That's going to pretty much wipe any trash that's in your way. Now, until you gain access to execution, you could run Jupiter's Blade, Aura of Flash, Dusk Edge, or Crimson Moon. I think Dusk Edge is probably going to be the best choice just because it's blood damage and nothing is really resistant to blood, but all of the sword moves have that same animation with the exception of execution, which is just upgraded to have a even bigger range. Lastly, I have Icarus Ice. Now, or Icarus Ice, however it's pronounced. This spell doesn't look that good on the dummy. As you can see, we're only seeing 1370, but what you'll notice there is that ice bounces around, and this actually is very, very effective when you're out fighting enemies, because you'll cast it on out, and then ice is going to bounce on out. It's going to hit multiple enemies, so there's a bit of an AoE component there, and I found it to actually be really reliable in fights, especially multi-enemy fights. Now, until you get access to that, the alternative, Dancing Blaze, is pretty good. It bounces more, but it does less damage per hit. But as you can see, those fireballs keep on coming back, and you know they'll basically do 2 full bounce rotations. So either of those is appropriate here, and ideally you could really use this slot for whatever spell you want. But I've become really fond of this for clearing out enemies when I'm surrounded, especially because of, once again, it is a very fast cast. And that's the whole point with these 4 main abilities, is these are our fast casts that we can get out. You know, there's no actual cast animation to them. They're very instantaneous, and that's what makes them potent. Now, as for our burst combo, your burst combo you're only going to really use when you have a clean window that you can absolutely destroy something. Now, Dark Shout is going to buff our Purging Thorn. Purging Thorn is on-demand damage. Fourfold Verdict is delayed damage. And then Sands of Depravity is just a massive AoE. So just to give you some number ideas here, using our Purging, let's see, we're doing 9,500 damage with that. Whereas if we buff it, 14,388, which is honestly ridiculous, which is why that buff move gets a slot, because it's increasing the strongest hitting move in the game by an extra 50%. Now, as for Sands of Depravity, this you can get from the Queen's Throat, which means you won't have access to that till the second time you're going through. In the meantime, you can run Volatile Storm. It's essentially just an upgrade to that. It costs 1 more Ichor. This is Volatile Storm, which was in the last build. Very potent, 6577 nice size AoE. Sands, on the other hand, 7673, much larger AoE. So essentially, you're just getting more damage and a bigger AoE, making it a very potent option. And on top of that, both of these abilities, both Volatile and Sands, are considered physical, so they don't take elemental resistances into account whatsoever, which is nice to see. Our final spell, Fourfold Verdict, I had this in the last build, and the great thing about this is the delay that's on it. When you it's instant to cast, and it has a slow delay, but it has very high tracking and very high damage at 8221. Now, as for your burst, what you're going to want to do is you cast Fourfold, you buff, you cast your spears, and then you cast Sand very quickly in that order, and when you execute it properly, see, we're doing 30,000 plus damage in a single burst. Needless to say, this absolutely melts any boss in the game. You know, obviously you need a decent window to pull this on off, but, you know, there are those times where you damage the boss and it kind of falls on down for a second, and those are the exact windows you're looking for. The boss gets stunned, they basically lay on the ground for roughly a second or two, and you put all of that out and you chunk the boss down to like half of its health. So we're going to jump back on into the depths. We'll show you a boss fight with this, show you just how nuky this gets. So for showcasing the build, we're at the 0 district of the depths. I'm going to be using this area to showcase all of the builds I make, actually, just to try and keep spoilers to a minimum. The main boss of this area is actually one that we already know from the demos, so I feel like it's a good fit to try and show off content while keeping spoilers low. But anyway, so we are going to just head on in here. We'll kill a couple things. We'll kill like one of the mini bosses and then knock out the main boss. And you're all dead. We'll beat down this thing real fast. Give me some backstab opportunities. And in terms of getting your Iker stock up, I'd recommend either backstabs or launch attacks. I'm well aware of drain attacks, but to be honest, drain attacks with Ivy are kind of risky business. It's a very, very slow thing. Like with claws, I'm all about it, but with using Ivy, it's just, I mean, you're kind of asking to get popped, essentially. Well, that thing's dead. And just to give a baseline, I'm pretty strong here. I'm at level 120. At this point, I've pretty much stopped leveling. Not for any particular reason, but just because I didn't want to showcase the builds being like level 150 or 200 or whatever. So I feel like 120 is kind of around the point you're at, having done a full run of the game and all the depths and everything. So it's to provide a good baseline, you could say. But yeah, at 120, as you can see, this place is, we're molesting it with this build. Alright, so let's fight the boss. Like I said, this guy was from the, back the beta demos and all that. So, should be an easy clap. And as I mentioned, one of the best ways to approach this is going to be to get the boss staggered and then go for your burst window. Not quite the stagger. It's coming up though. And as you can see, even against a big old teleporty boy, we're still able to just clap cheeks. So either way, that is going to wrap up the Mage build 2.0. I do still plan on doing the strength build, but after discovering all the additional blood codes and seeing the new spells I had access to, I really wanted to get this one out for you guys. So either way, thanks for coming on by. Hope you enjoyed the upgrades, and I will catch you all soon enough with the strength build.